This is the Erasing Shame podcast, Season 3. Honest talk for healthy living, growing, and thriving.
All right, well, welcome everybody to Season 3 of Erasing Shame, and this is Nancy Lee, and I'm your co-host for this season. I'm actually here with Debbie Berry, who has been one of the people who has helped instruct and guide me through this past season of pressing into my own shame experience, and she's been such an amazing expert in the field, and someone I'm just so grateful for all the knowledge and wisdom and expertise that she's pressed into to be able to help people like me, as well as now being able to bring her knowledge and insight for everyone here on the podcast as well. So I did want to bring her on here and allow her to be able to share a lot about the different nuances of shame, because shame is not just a feeling, it is a way of life, and it affects our relationships, our self-esteem, our psychology, our ability to be able to do the things that we actually want to do with our life. So everyone meet Debbie. And Debbie, do you want to do a quick introduction? I know she's the director of the Life Skills program here in San Diego, and she works a lot just one-on-one with clients all the time. You're just in and out of this conversation every day. So do you want to share a little bit of your journey of how you got into the whole field?
Sure, happy to. So I came into the program about maybe 15 years ago. Didn't really know too much about the Life Skills program at all until I met my future husband, and certainly didn't know anything about shame. Had lots of issues. My background is professional sales, human resources. So came into the program with a lot of issues, started teaching it. My husband and I are the directors here in San Diego, and really am excited about an opportunity to share some of these details with people, because, as you said, it really is something that's very insidious, and it really drives and controls our lives in ways that most people really don't realize. So I'm hoping this will be helpful.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so excited to be able to have you come on today, because a lot of people think shame is just a feeling, but it's more than a feeling. It just is everything, our whole life, our whole way of being. I know we've learned a lot about the psychology of shame. Do you want to really just talk a little bit about how it even begins and where shame enters into our world and our identity, and why it's just so debilitating as individuals?
Yes, absolutely. So just a little bit about really how it gets started with childhood wounding. Which could look like anything from, rejection, certainly any kind of trauma, abuse, physical, emotional, verbal, sexual abuse, abandonment, which could look like divorce, cultural stigmas or shame from culture or ethnicity, poverty, things that come into our lives as children that we really don't know how to deal with. And one of the tenets of the program that we teach is that children without the chemicals that we get in puberty take on responsibility for all of the losses in their lives. And that really manifests in rejection.
And when you say losses, what does that mean?
Like emotional needs not being met, not being validated for who we are, feeling like we're only important when we do the right things, feeling accepted no matter what we do or say, that we're loved unconditionally. So emotional losses, sometimes physical loss of relationship, or even losses like loss of a parent or death, or anything that needs that don't get met that should have been met for us as kids.
So can you maybe detail a little bit about what are those needs? So like if somebody wants to successfully parent, what are things that they want to keep in mind so that they're doing that well and their children don't fall into shame? And I think from our understanding was as early as 18 months. But do you want to kind of delve into that a little bit more?
Yeah. Oh, sure. So we can be shamed unintentionally. I mean, I guess some of the things that parents could do differently would be, learn how to manage their own emotions. so that they can be in control of themselves and then be able to manage their kids' emotions. So if a parent is shame-based themselves and don't know how to manage their own emotions, it's really hard for them to deal with the emotions of their children. And because they can't deal with their children's emotions, often they wind up shutting them down, dismissing them, discounting them, um, creating the feeling in the child that something's wrong with them because they didn't do this or they didn't do it well enough, or that creating in the child the feeling that I'm only acceptable and loved when I do this or when I don't do that, when I measure up, and if I don't, then I'm not lovable. They fail to separate out the child's behavior from the child themselves. So then the children become their mistakes. They become their failings. They become their shortcomings instead of being able to communicate to the child that you're lovable no matter what you do. Your behavior may not be acceptable, but you are lovable, and your behavior can't change the way that I feel about you.
Yeah, so it's basically not being able to, at that point, since they're so young, separate that
Right.
I made a mistake versus I am the mistake,
I am
which
a
is
mistake.
where we talk about the difference between guilt versus shame.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And because it then comes into an internalized sense of values, therefore, that's like the bigger process of breaking
Right.
free and overcoming and self-esteem and
Right.
all that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because so before a child reaches puberty, we don't have the chemicals to be able to rationalize and reason
Mhm.
that if I'm being hurt in some way, if I'm not getting needs met, if I'm being abused or neglected in some way, that it's not my fault. Kids don't realize that if they're not being parented properly, that it doesn't have anything to do with them.
Mhm.
So when we take responsibility for that, then that winds up being, I must be the problem. There must be something wrong with me. I must be defective in some way that this person's treating me like this.
Mhm.
And so then after a certain, certainly after puberty, that becomes our belief system. That
Yeah.
becomes really now my truth about me, that there is something wrong with me, and that the only way I can be acceptable is to, be perform in some way, that can create perfectionism. We become, what does he say, human doings instead of human
Mm.
beings,
Mhm.
knowing that we're only acceptable if we don't make mistakes or if we measure up or, something along those lines. So,
Mhm.
and our belief system is really hard to break. It's hard to change the feeling that you are unworthy, that you aren't acceptable, that you don't measure up, that you are inferior. And so then, unfortunately, we don't get rid of that belief system just because we grow up. We drag that with us through our lives. And unfortunately, we drag that belief system into our relationships.
Yeah.
And then we wind up getting in relationships with people who don't validate us, who don't value us, which really comes from us not valuing ourselves.
Mm.
Yeah, so it isn't something that goes away just because we leave home and we're not in that environment anymore.
Yeah. So all of this happens pre-puberty,
Pre-puberty.
and pretty much everybody has it in some form,
Right, in
right?
some form,
To
sure,
some
sure,
degree.
right.
So
Yeah, you
it's a
could
normal thing.
have, like, the best parenting in the world, and a child can still be traumatized by things that are outside of the parent's control. I mean, maybe something like you're born maybe with a handicap or something, and you feel shame for that, or maybe your family, sometimes children that are born in poverty, then they wind up feeling like, there's something wrong with them because they can't have what the other kids can have, or maybe they have a learning disability that makes them, different from the other
Yeah.
kids. So, or they can certainly be shamed outside of the home, schools, bullying,
Mhm.
that kind of thing that the parents aren't necessarily responsible for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially in the Asian culture, I mean, we talk about how in Asia and Middle Eastern cultures, they're
Mhm.
shame-based cultures.
Yeah.
So the behaviors that come from that, therefore, are just kind of acceptable. And
Right.
it just becomes a normal way of life.
Mhm.
And for me, being an Asian American, now at a place in my adulthood where I can really start delving into deeper identity and separating that shame and stepping into the deeper individual self, there is a little bit of a grieving process to be able to break through the layers of shame. But pretty much you have the tools, and this is what you get to do in your class of helping people be free of shame, even though we probably all carry at least a little bit of it, right?
Right.
Yeah, because the process is the same, no matter what your experience, no matter if it's a
How you
cultural
got it.
disability, whatever the shame is from, the process of getting out of it is the same.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's painful. It's so painful.
It's
So
painful.
painful that most people can't deal with it.
Uh-huh.
They find ways to avoid the pain of the shame. One of the ways that they avoid it is denial.
Yeah.
Which really just you're in complete denial that you even have the shame. If I can share a little bit of what that looked like for me. So I came into the program in really full tilt denial. I was a relationship addict. I was a compulsive shopper. I was a workaholic, a perfectionist, struggled with control issues in my relationships. I wasn't able to not be in a relationship. And so I picked the same types of unhealthy people over and over, and not realizing that any of those behaviors were driven by shame.
Yeah.
So what I couldn't see was that if my self-esteem really was intact, that I wouldn't have needed to do all of those things. I wouldn't have needed to impress people with what I was wearing or where I was traveling or how much money I could make. I never understood that that's what really drove those behaviors. My denial was so deep that I just thought that was my personality. And those were some of my defense mechanisms to avoid the pain of not feeling like I was really worthy or that I really measured up or was as good as other people.
Yeah.
So I felt like if I made as much money as most other people, then that my value was tied up in that, which is scary because when your value is tied up in something that you do, and then that's threatened in some way, then where do you go to get your value?
Yeah, and then competition and jealousy and manipulation all follow as part of that.
Sure, yeah. And we talk about also that, that in our relationships, we pick people that are wounded at the same level that we are. And so I'm picking partners that are wounded also, and their dysfunction and their shame sometimes conflicted with the way my dysfunction and my shame manifested. So I wasn't able to maintain any kind of healthy relationship, really, not just with men, but even friendships. It was very difficult because, we talk about in life skills that you're present in a pseudo personality. I'm being the kind of person that I need to be so that you'll like me, so that you'll accept me.
Which is a very surface level
Very surface
personality, but then behind the home, all the shame comes out, all the dysfunction comes out. And then I know we talked about in our class about dual personality.
Sure.
So not just the pseudo personality, but there's two parts of yourself, and you're fully like a whole different person in different settings and scenarios, right?
Yeah. And it's hard to have true intimacy in a relationship if you're not really there. So I'm there in this pseudo personality, and of course, because I'm picking unhealthy people, they're also there in their pseudo personality, and so there's really no one there to connect with because we're both just pretending. And what's sad is we don't even know we're pretending. I mean, I honestly believe that my pseudo was who I was.
Yeah.
So when you start to come out of the shame and realize that it's really okay to be just who you really are, that who you really are is enough, it's almost like you have to get to know a whole nother person.
Welcome to my year.
Yeah. You have to know. And then sometimes you don't really like the new you. That old person who I was so comfortable. It was really comfortable, and I knew her. So then I get to learn and enjoy this new person and get to know her.
Yeah.
And
It protected you for so long, and it worked for so long.
Right, for so long. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was physically, emotionally, verbally, and sexually abused by my dad. physically, emotionally, verbally abused by my mom. So I think myself went into hiding really young. We talk about in the program that you can create codependency in children as young as the age of 2, where the child slowly starts to learn, even that young, that it's not okay to be who I really am. I have to be like this so that my mom doesn't get mad, or I can't do or say anything like this because my dad will be angry. So we slowly but surely through our childhood wind up learning it's not really okay to be me. For everybody else to be okay. And I have women come into the program, midlife, really, or as early as their 20s and 30s, and they don't really even know who they are. They're so out of touch with their identity from it being in hiding so many years, taking care of other people's feelings, that it's really, it can be a struggle to find out who you really are and be comfortable in that new persona.
But you do see breakthroughs.
Oh, absolutely.
There is a process. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
There is. And it's once people realize that they have the awareness that they are in their pseudo, and that it's okay to, put those walls down and be the person that you really are, and the person that you were really meant to be. And then it's painful. It's a painful process to come out of denial and start to feel those feelings that have been repressed for so long because they were just so uncomfortable and maybe even unsafe.
How does one even start to uncover those feelings then? Because it's not like one day you just wake up and you're like...
Right. Yeah. And that's sometimes people will come into the program and say, I'm not sure that this program will help me because I don't have a lot of memory, maybe, about my childhood. And so, which that's actually common. And we tell people that it's okay, that you can still get help because you're here to change behaviors. And the behaviors that you want to change, you can see. And so we start focusing on the behaviors that they want to change. And then we had this process called thinking, feeling, behaving. And our behaviors are driven by our feelings, and our feelings are driven by our thoughts and or our belief system. So we try to uncover what is your belief system, or what's your negative self-talk that creates these feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, worthlessness, and what's the truth? What's the truth about you? It isn't true that you're not good enough. It isn't true that you're worthless. It isn't true that you don't matter. Those are not true statements. They may be your beliefs, but your beliefs are not necessarily true.
Or in my case, where I had come to a place of burnout, I feel like there's probably a lot of people that also finally come to you because, it came to a place where now there's an emergency, a crisis of I need to get better, or my marriage is about to divorce, or I'm about to, something's about to happen. They've recognized that the need to get healthy outweighs the dysfunction that they've lived with for so long.
Right, exactly. They've spent years of, maybe they're like me, where they didn't even know that I didn't even know I was responsible for the demise of all these relationships. So, but you're right. Some people do come to us in crisis. Maybe they're about to lose their marriage or their family, or, they're struggling professionally because they can't, maintain a job, or most of their relationships are falling apart, or, an addiction is getting the better part of them. I mean, a lot of people escape the shame by checking out or escaping with an addiction, right? Our program teaches that addictions are rooted in shame. I mean, if my self-esteem is intact, then I don't want to escape from me. I have no need to drink too much, or eat too much, or shop too much, or whatever else we do to escape the pain of how we feel about ourselves.
Satisfy that need externally,
right.
basically.
Yeah.
And I found that for me, leading myself out of this season of me falling into some depression and just not being able to be strong enough, and that shame creeped in, where I was no longer able to lead myself successfully, I realized when I was going through the program the reactive lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
and how much of that has debilitated most of my life and how I've
Right.
been basically living in that place. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I didn't even realize that my behaviors would be classified as reactive behaviors. I mean, when you think that your behavior is just part of your personality, then you're not even really motivated even to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So, having the awareness created that, yeah, these behaviors are dysfunctional. So here's another way that comes about. So I didn't have experienced a kind of denial that looked like I wasn't aware that I had been abused or traumatized. That
Mm-hmm.
wasn't what my denial looked like. My denial was that I was in denial about the impact that it had on my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I came into the program when I was in my late 40s, and I could not have believed that all of those things that happened to me in my childhood had anything to do with the way I was living my life
Mm-hmm.
or the choices that I was making. So, and of course, those things that happened to me were absolutely driving my choices, but I couldn't see it. So once I could see it and it started to make sense, then I could see, okay, that's something that I can change. And there's where the hope comes in, that there is a way out.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way out. The hopelessness that this is what I'm just sort of relegated to for the rest of my life
Mm-hmm.
um, goes away.
I mean, what's a good first step for someone who, let's just say, there's people that have been hiding behind this for a long time to even just start taking that first step in recognizing that this is something that maybe they should get a little help from?
Mm. Well, coming out of denial helps,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even though that's really not how I came into the program. I came into the program to figure out how someone else got healthy.
Yeah,
Um,
it's all about them,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
His blaming is another
Yeah,
aspect of the
it helps.
shame.
It helps if you're not in denial, for sure.
Yeah.
But let's just say you're not. So you come into the program and you're not in denial, and slowly we start to help people become aware that their behavior does not define them,
Mm-hmm.
right? And start giving them, permission and the freedom to make decisions and choices for their own lives, to make their
Mm-hmm.
lives what they want them to be, and not something that they're living to fulfill, a belief system, or we call it life commandment and life skills. So,
Yeah.
yeah, create the awareness that you can make choices. You can take control of your life
Mm-hmm.
and make better choices, and then understanding, the pathways to what would keep you from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So helping people take those first few steps and walking with them, and it's kind of a discipleship in a way,
Yeah.
to help people come out of denial and change their lives, change their relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Because most of the time, it's going to affect our self-esteem, our self-confidence,
Right,
and then on the external side, like you're saying, you'll start seeing it in forms of addiction, in
right,
forms of just dysfunction in relationships. So that's usually when
right,
people start having like the light bulb of like, oh my gosh,
right.
there's something wrong. I probably need to
Sure,
work on this
sure.
and fix this, right?
Yeah, often you'll see families where, what shame can look like is families that are enmeshed, where they don't have boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost like this free for all where people say and do whatever they want, just,
Yeah.
maybe by mere virtue of the fact that we're related. Somehow that gives me permission to,
Mm-hmm.
say anything to anyone. We talk a lot about codependency. Codependency is an addiction too, and
Mm-hmm.
that comes from shame and perfectionism, blame shifting. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
ways. The pain of shame is so intense that people will do almost anything
Mm-hmm.
to avoid feeling that pain about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, you can only escape for so long.
Yeah.
And then you go back and it's still there.
Mhm.
So,
And
uh,
even connecting to our emotions. I mean, that
mhm,
was one of the very first things that we did.
right.
Most people have never connected because with shame, I
Hmm.
know we talked about it's just like minimizing what feelings
Right.
are.
Hmm.
Shame, was it sad, mad, and glad are the
Right.
only things that's acceptable.
Hmm.
So, like, can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
how someone would even start
Sure.
understanding their
Yeah.
internal self?
Yeah. So one of the things that can happen when you grow up in a family that is shame based and they don't allow feelings, I grew up in a family where, you weren't allowed to be angry, you weren't allowed to be sad. We often heard things like, wipe that look off your face, or I'll give you something to cry about, that type of thing. So emotions were really not, I don't even know if discouraged is strong enough, forbidden maybe.
Yeah.
Anything other than happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is a lot of people wind up living in their head, completely unaware of anything that's going on below their neck in the way of feelings. So yeah, we start out early in the program with our feeling word list to create this awareness that, like you're saying, there's a wide range of emotions that people can have besides just mad, sad, or glad. And for me, I can remember I was processing through an issue one time, and my husband was asking me how I felt about the issue. And unbeknownst to me, for quite a while, I kept telling him what I thought, not even realizing that I wasn't telling him how I felt.
Mm.
And then he said, you keep telling me what you think, and I'm asking you how you feel.
Yeah.
And as soon as I got out of my head and went down into, okay, what am I really feeling? Then I started to cry.
Yeah.
Because I was able to connect to something.
Wow.
So it's safe to be up in your head.
Yeah.
It's safe. But there's not healing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we say is if you can't feel it, you can't heal it.
Wow, I like that.
So
We haven't heard that in class yet.
yeah.
If you can't feel it, you can't heal it.
heal it. Yeah. It's hard to heal. You don't have feelings as long as you're safe in your thoughts.
Because when you feel it, you can connect to it and then take responsibility,
Right.
ownership, process
Yeah.
it, and then detach yourself
Mhm.
from the event, the behavior
Right.
versus yourself, right?
Right. And people are often afraid of their feelings, and it is scary when maybe you've spent most of your life avoiding your feelings, or maybe blaming someone else for your feelings, denying your feelings. And then all of a sudden, here we are encouraging you to look at them and feel them, bring your feelings to consciousness, and like we say, sit in the feelings, sit in the pain, let's process out of it instead of running from it or denying it.
And the way that we have it designed in class is it's a 32-week program with a safe community. So we're consistently, having the right people that's in the same people in our space to be able to do this with. So it's not something that people just do by themselves as successfully.
Right.
It requires a little bit of help.
Mhm.
And so I know that's kind of the power of life skills, is being able to have the whole program structured around
Yeah, we
that.
do try to create a safe, non-shaming, non-judgmental environment so people can feel like it's safe to be transparent and heal. And then having the support and encouragement of the group too is powerful. It's nice to know that you're not alone,
Yeah.
that there are people that are struggling with some of the same things that you're struggling with, and they can relate, so you don't feel so alone and isolated. You have a tendency when you grow up in a shame-based family where you sort of learn that you don't talk about things outside that happen in the home, outside of the home. And so where do you go with your pain? You can't talk about it because sometimes it's embarrassing. You're ashamed of what's happening in your home. So you just stuff it and stuff it and stuff it. And it winds up coming out sometimes sideways with physical ailments or other reactive behaviors. So it's nice to get in a group and experience other people's pain. And then that can give you the freedom to open up and share yours.
Yeah, which is why thank you so much for sharing a little bit here on Erasing Shame, because that was one community that I found for myself. And I really want to be able to have other people, learn some of the things I've learned with you over the course of this past year. But even if that community is just online, that also is a safe place to start, and then it's connecting to physical community as well, and actually having human connection. Yeah, I know, it's so powerful. What are the other modules that you go through for phase 2? Because I know we kind of go through the overall, phase 1 of just learning how to be healthy in relationships and having tools so that we can process our emotions, taking time out, slowing things down, and questioning ourselves and our feelings in the situation. But then there's also opportunity for those who go through phase 1 to delve deeper into the other layers.
Yeah. So once you've completed the first phase one program, you can go into phase two, and that's a series of individual modules. There's 16 different
Mm-hmm.
modules, and so we're going through shame together right
Yeah.
now. And but we have a module on boundaries. We have modules on rejection,
Mm-hmm.
denial and defense mechanisms, codependency, anger, conflict resolution, mature love, addictive love, sexual abuse. So there's 16 different modules, and they're shorter. They're anywhere
Yeah.
from maybe 8 to 12 weeks each.
Mm-hmm.
So people can kind of come in and out of modules as they
Yeah.
see that they need them. And then we do have a certain core group in all of the classes that's just going through all of the modules because
It's a
honestly, everybody.
lifelong process of
Mhm.
learning.
Yeah, we call ourselves life skills lifers.
Yeah.
So we're just in there for the next module. Right. Yeah, it's very powerful. We have more flexibility with the time in phase two.
Yeah.
So we can do deeper processing. You probably have seen the difference in that for yourself.
Yeah, because we don't learn this in school.
Right. Right. Where
We
do
don't
you
learn this
learn?
in church. We don't
No.
necessarily, like, where do
Right.
we learn this?
Right.
And
Right.
it's so important. I feel like we should all learn this by the time we're 13, right?
Yeah,
By puberty.
absolutely. And I don't know, where our parents were shamed when they were growing up and their parents were shamed. So part of the life skills program is to help people learn so that they can break the cycle. They can be the
Yeah.
generation that breaks the cycle of dysfunction and
Mhm.
shame so that the next generation can grow up learning and being okay with themselves and hopefully not perpetuate that on the
Mhm.
next generation.
Yeah, and also just now with the popularity of shame becoming a little bit more increased in just media and stuff like that, are you seeing more people come and getting a little bit more help?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm also seeing more people coming with an awareness of what shame is.
Yeah.
I mean, in the beginning, I don't even think I could have described it other than, the feeling of being ashamed.
Yeah.
I couldn't have connected to, the condition of shame, if you will.
Mhm.
That people sort of live their lives in a state of shame
Yeah.
and not even know it.
Mhm.
Not even know it.
And there's so much lack of distrust, not just with others, but with yourself.
Oh, self-doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of your decisions are debilitated too.
Right, right. You don't
Your
even
career
trust yourself.
choices.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. It manifests itself in every area of your life.
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes we can be highly functioning in one area of our lives, maybe professionally, but we're completely incapable, which this is my story, highly successful in my professional life, but completely incapable of having a successful adult relationship.
Yeah.
One of the things we talk about in the program is in order to have a successful adult relationship, we should all be able to answer these three questions. Who
Mm.
am I? What do I want? And where am I going?
Yeah.
And if you're a shame based person, you do not know who you are. And maybe you don't even think you have the right to have wants and needs. So if you don't know who you are, you don't think you have the right to have wants and needs, how do you know the direction that you want for your life? And
Mm.
yet we go into relationships, speaking for myself, we go into relationships without the answer to those three questions and then wonder why I can't have a successful relationship.
Yeah. And then it's all projecting it on our
Right.
partner
Oh,
or
yeah.
taking on their
Right. It's your
beliefs.
fault I'm not happy.
It's a
It's
huge
your fault.
cycle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And even to the process of being healthy, I know we talk about it has to be adult to adult.
Right.
But what happens when there's shame is it typically reverses the role of parent to child or child
Right.
to parent, depending on
Right.
which
Hmm.
relationship you're in.
Right. And you can
So,
flip flop in the same relationship, from parenting your partner to wanting to be parented or acting
mm,
like a child. And yeah,
yeah,
you're not comfortable in that adult role.
yeah.
Mhm.
What about boundaries? Can you highlight a little bit about if somebody doesn't even know where to start or what that looks like? I know
Right,
that
right.
you said that's
Hmm.
extra challenge depending on
Hmm.
culture.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, one of the things we teach in our phase two boundaries class is that the reason that people don't set boundaries often is because they don't think they're worth it.
mhm,
I don't think I'm really worth standing up for. I
yeah,
don't believe that I have the right to say no, that I'm unable with that, or that's not acceptable. So we don't set boundaries because we don't believe that we're worth it. And then we teach also that when we don't set boundaries for ourselves, it's really internal abuse. It's self-abuse to not stand up for myself. Um, Usually out of, codependency, that someone's going to be angry or hurt, or that will be rejected in some way.
Because the enmeshment.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
because of the enmeshment. So we teach people that you are worth protecting. You may not have been protected, you may not have had a voice when you were growing up, but you do now, and that it's okay to use it. It's okay to use it.
And then I know you mentioned one thing that really stood out for me, because I've been feeling a lot of this in this past season. Shame can basically surface when there is a difference of values.
Sure.
So whenever
sure.
you're in an environment, learning about what your needs are in terms of what your values, so knowing yourself well enough that you also can be able to set yourself up for success by the relationships in your life, as well as the environments or the career choices that you're in.
Right.
That was a huge thing
And
for me.
realizing that it's okay to want what you want.
Yeah.
Even if somebody doesn't agree with it, it's really okay to want what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to get those needs met. That's another principle of the program that we teach, is that we're all 100% responsible for getting our needs met.
Yeah.
It's not your responsibility to meet my needs. It's my responsibility to get my needs met. And that can be scary, and even some people might say it's threatening. But for me, as a recovering control freak, I always liked anything that empowered me, that I can get my needs met, and I'm responsible to get my needs met. And that it's also freeing to realize that I'm not responsible to meet other people's needs.
Yeah.
So that's very freeing too.
Yeah. So in terms of boundaries, like what are just maybe just a few key words or phrases that you would even say to like set a boundary?
Yeah, setting a boundary could sound something like, it's not okay to talk to me that way. Or if you are going to raise your voice, I'll have to leave the conversation. Or even no, that's not okay with me. I mean, something like that, even though it sounds fairly simple, maybe, and straightforward, if you don't believe that it's okay for you to speak up, that will be hard. It will be hard for you to just say, it's not okay for you to talk to me that way, or this behavior isn't acceptable. That's very hard to say if you don't believe that you're worth it, that you're worth being spoken to respectfully.
Because if someone didn't have shame, there should be nothing that can take from their self-worth or take from their confidence or values.
Exactly. It reminds me, often in class, I'll have women say that I had a lot of confidence and my self-esteem was intact, for instance, until I married my husband. And then he stole all my self-esteem. So, which that's not reality from where we come from, that if you have self-esteem, no one can steal it from you. It's how you feel about yourself. And you choose how you feel about yourself. No one can take your value. You can give it away, but no one can take it.
Yeah.
So you have, if your self-esteem is intact and someone was crossing your boundaries, maybe by being unkind or even abusive, then you would right away be able to say, I'm worth more than that. I need you to stop. This is a red flag. I can't continue if you're going to talk to me that way or treat me that way. And you wouldn't allow your boundaries to be crossed.
Yeah.
So if you're allowing yourself to be abused, if you're allowing your boundaries to be crossed, then your self-esteem is not intact.
Yeah. Because what we typically see, especially in the Asian community, because there's so much suppressing, then when it comes out sideways, it's either full on depression or full on rage and anger.
Right.
And then, it's getting that back to a healthy place
balance.
and learning all these skills. So
Yeah. There's so many levels to it. We call it's like an onion, peeling away the layers of an onion, trying to get closer to that root or that core of shame.
And then I think we have about maybe 10 minutes left. I'd love for you to share some tools or strategies for people to even begin the conversation of getting out of shame, other than going through your program.
Right.
What would you say is the process for people who are really wanting to get better and seek getting help? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that it's not easy, but if you have some insight into yourself, to maybe try to identify what are some of the core beliefs that you have about yourself? Often there'll be patterns that are unique to our wounding. Maybe I just don't feel like I measure up. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I don't feel like I'm important or as important as other people. And recognizing, we call that, you know, breaking the loyalty that we have to our family of origin, those messages that we got, and recognizing that it is a choice to choose to believe something different. You don't have to choose to continue to believe things that are not true about you, that you're not valuable. And it's so interesting because it's so easy for us to see that with other people. If we have children or close friends, that we can so clearly see their value. And yet we can't see it for ourselves. So sometimes I'll say, what would you tell your daughter if your daughter was thinking that about herself? Oh my gosh, I would tell her how valuable she was and how incredible she was, but I can't see it for me. So I would say identifying some of the belief systems that you have that aren't true.
Yeah.
We also start early in the program with positive self-talk, right? We've been fed and believed for so long things that aren't true about ourselves, that we're not worthy, that we're not valuable, that we're not lovable, that we're only as good as the last good thing that we did. So we talk about positive self-talk. We also do a lot of work and try to enforce the concept of letting go. There's so little really that we're in control of. And if we can learn to let go of things that we're not in control of, there's a lot of freedom in that.
How does that process look like?
Letting go of trying to control other people. I'll speak for myself. So letting go of trying to control what people think or how people say things. One of the arrested development behaviors that where I came from was feeling like I needed to correct people. I was one of those people that would correct grammar, that would correct, vocabulary, that would correct behaviors or judge. Or judge.
Criticism.
Yeah, criticism, instead of realizing that, I only got one life to live and it's mine.
Yeah.
So I have to let go and let other people live their lives and not try to rescue, let people experience the natural consequences of their choices, and let go. So those are three really big things that people can start with, and identifying behaviors that you're not happy with, and take responsibility for it. Lots of people want to, out of their shame, make someone else responsible for my bad behavior. When we talk about in the program that blame shifting is a key evidence that shame exists.
Yeah.
If I'm an emotionally intact adult, then I can take responsibility for my behavior. I can come to you and say, I'm so sorry I said that. I really value you more than that. And that's something that I've been working on. And I'm hoping that you can forgive me. Right? I can come to you and be honest and take responsibility for my behavior. And I can apologize. But if I'm shame-based, then I'll figure out a way to make you responsible for my bad behavior. If you hadn't said that, then I wouldn't have had to do this type of a thing.
Yeah.
So understanding that I have to take responsibility for my behavior to come out of my shame.
Yeah.
Right. And that even if you're not okay with that, I can still learn how to be okay.
Yeah. And I mean, for letting go too, I know we do a lot with forgiveness. And walking through the process of forgiveness, which was a whole new concept for me until, I became a Christian and really learning through the process of that.
Right.
But
that we're called to forgive.
yeah, there's a lot of pride that can hold us back from forgiveness. But just to quickly touch upon that, I know like I've learned in my journey that forgiveness is not about actually just letting go of the other person and letting them off the hook entirely in terms of the activity, the behavior, but it's so that they're no longer responsible for the emotions, right, that they caused in you, right?
Yeah.
Is there
And
anything
my
you want to add to
shame,
that?
oh sure, my shame would have kept me from forgiving. That kept that person, you're going to owe me for the rest of your life for whatever the infraction was. But yeah, the more we come to terms with our shame, the easier it gets to forgive, because I don't need someone to to like me or feel good about me, or I don't need to um, have someone else look bad to feel good about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need that. And we teach in the program too. This was an aspect of forgiveness that I would struggle with, which is that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation,
Yeah.
right? That I can forgive someone and choose not to have relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the past that held me back from forgiving, because my thought was, if I forgive you, then now I have to be your friend again, and it wasn't safe.
Yeah.
So that was helpful for me to realize I could forgive and not reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then I know there's towards the tail end of the program, you go through a little bit teaching about communication.
Hmm.
So not just working on yourself, but then how can we be effective communicators so that our needs are also getting met.
Right.
I know one of the things that was highlighted in the class was NLP, which I talked in an
Hmm.
earlier podcast.
Hmm.
But another thing that I find really valuable and that a lot of people struggle with is when somebody comes to you with their pain, by default, a lot of people just want to give advice.
Right.
And
Right.
you do it so well in the class of framing that so that there's safe spaces, there are tools,
Sure. Sure.
things that you want to leave with people so that
Hmm.
whether it's for them or for other people, that
Yeah.
they can create safe space.
Yeah. Yeah. We have this concept that we talk about in life skills called staying in the box.
Mm-hmm.
So you come to me in some type of emotional pain, and instead of me trying to what we call fix you, by telling you, well, it's okay, this too shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
You have your whole life ahead of you. You have so many good qualities. We don't want to fix the situation or fix the person. We want to stay connected to them. So if you came to me with some kind of emotional pain, I might say to you, tell me more about that. Tell me what you're feeling. It sounds like you're scared. Where are you thinking this is going to lead? I want to connect with you. I want to be in that box with you,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not afraid to feel bad, and I'm not afraid if you're going to feel bad doing that. You're coming to me, so I want to be a safe place to
Yeah.
process with you and to relate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have another principle that we teach about unsolicited advice being a
Mm-hmm.
form of abuse. Yeah, I don't automatically assume that you're coming to me for advice.
Mm-hmm.
You might just be coming to me for, a soft shoulder, or for some compassion, or for some empathy, or just to relate. And so often we'll say, what can I do? What do you need from me right now?
Yeah.
How can I help you?
Yeah.
Do you just want to vent, or are you open to feedback?
Mm-hmm.
And then that helps me be a better listener too.
Yeah. And
Right?
I think if we all really learn that as a skill,
Yeah.
the nation's increasing mental health illnesses and
Right.
all that would
Right.
just be so much better.
Yeah, because it is an
Yeah.
assumption that somebody's coming to you for advice. I mean, I
Yeah.
would do that all the time. Immediately go to, well, did you try this? Well, did you do this? Or how about
Mm-hmm.
this? And that can often not
Yeah.
be satisfying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's kind of our time for now. I did want to leave you with a few minutes just to let our audience know a little bit more of where to get in touch with you, or if they are interested in
Okay.
signing up with the program, or if it's not in San Diego, maybe if there's other resources throughout the states
Okay.
that they can turn
Okay,
to.
sure. So if you're not in California, the phone number for Life Skills International, it's an easy one. It's 1-800-HURTING, HURTING, if you're
Mm-hmm.
not in California. If you're in Southern California, you can look at our website, which is lifeskillsandiego.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe on our website, there's actually a link to the international life skills also.
Okay, cool. And
Yeah.
you run the program in San
Right.
Diego.
My husband and I are the directors of Life Skills in Southern California.
Okay, all of
All of
all of
Southern
SoCal.
California.
Yeah.
Right. We have
Awesome.
about 6 different locations in San Diego County and one in Riverside that we teach the program in for men and for women.
Oh, I didn't know you did the Riverside one.
Mhm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's in Temecula. Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time
You're
to
welcome.
come and share with
For
us.
pursuing me. I've been wanting to do this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I know
Appreciate
that
it.
there's so much value that I'm getting from going through the program with you.
Mhm.
And, we just want everyone to be able to have healthier tools and skill sets so that they can get through their
Yeah.
pain and just be better functioning adults and
Yeah.
live the life that they
Absolutely.
deserve. I know I've done a lot with the life coaching
aspect, and I'm stepping into the NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and that sort of healing
Mhm.
modalities. But they all are just great tools to
Right,
really complete
right,
the whole package of the person and what we need
right.
as individuals. So,
Yeah, be the
yeah,
people that we were meant to be. Mhm,
exactly. All
mhm.
right, so that's our time,
Okay,
everyone.
thank
This is
you.
Debbie Berry again from Life Skills San Diego, and she has just such great wisdom here. I hope that you learned some great golden nuggets and that you can pass this message along for other people that can really benefit. Really, we can all benefit in some way, but don't be shy. Don't be afraid to talk about your pain. Really be able to press into the person that you deserve to be, and know that there are tools, there are skills, there are ways to be able to overcome that and to be whole and healed. So that's it for today's episode of Erasing Shame.
Thank you for being a part of Erasing Shame. Please rate and review on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, and like on Facebook. Share with your friends and followers. Together, we are erasing shame one story at a time. Get all the details at erasingshame.com.